Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology. Only from TenCate Protective Fabrics.
Seconds count when responding to an emergency. Minutes save count when documenting your day. Emergency networking makes records management easier and faster with its Fire and EMS solution. User-friendly, complete online and offline functionality, highly customizable, all at an affordable price. For more information, please visit emergencynetworking.com.
And welcome to tonight's Politics and Tactics. We got a great guest for you that really needs no introduction. He's probably published more books, more articles than any other author for fire engineering. Not only does he publish based off his years of command experience, but he's also one of the few intellectuals in the fire service who edits his own work, which is something that is just a lost art in the fire service. So I've had the privilege to write with him, do DVDs with him, and no matter what endeavor Anthony Avillo puts his name on, he always just makes it that much better. So it's an honor to have Anthony Avillo on with us. Tonight I got Dave Polikoff, our co-host. And Anthony, welcome to Politics and Tactics.
Thank you, brother. Thanks. Haven't been on this show in a long time. I remember I was one of the inaugural guys with this show, and we've been doing this for, now I'm with Duffy. We've been doing this for quite a while. Dave, good to see you, brother.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Frank, to have me on. And, it's and editing my own stuff. No, they edit it. They just don't edit that much.
No, but see, when we did the Firefighter's Handbook, we wrote things together, and you edited all my stuff before it was introduced it to English. So I have appreciation for you that most people wouldn't, Anthony.
Oh, man. Yeah. It's interesting that when I went from the first edition of my book to the second edition, the first edition was like, I think barely 300 pages. The second edition was almost 700. And I said, well, they'll whittle it down. They'll edit it down. They didn't edit anything. I was like, oh, my God, now I got a friggin' table leg.
And that brings us to really where I want to start this conversation off with is now you're on the fourth edition. Is that correct?
Yeah, I just submitted it about 2 weeks ago. So I'm really excited about it. I'm hoping that, it's a smooth, ride to the publication of the book.
And when do you expect that to be out?
I don't know. I'm hoping FDIC, but I really don't think that'll happen. You're talking, that's like only 6 months, so maybe next FDIC, maybe Christmas, I don't know. I know they always have a lot of books in the till, and, the turnaround time, especially for, a book as big as the one I usually put out is, I tried to whittle this one down, and it's just not possible. You're throwing all the other things in, all the new building construction and new findings in the, fire behavior. And, I just a lot of different things, newer things have gone into this book, and I'm real proud of it. And I'm hoping that it comes out sooner than later. But, I as you know, and your book is great, by the way, man.
Okay.
I understand, the process. Been through it.
Absolutely. Now, I had the honor of being introduced to Chief Flood, who I thought was a remarkable individual, somebody who mentored you, and somebody, when I needed quotes for my book, I reached out to Anthony Avillo and I said, hey, you got like a couple of quotes you can send me? And he sent me a full sheet of Chief Flood quotes. So I, just like Thomas Edison, borrowing brilliance. When you see something brilliant, you're like, you know what, this really says it all without saying too much. And I used a lot of his quotes. Did you use any Chief Flood book quotes in your book?
Oh, yeah. And since he was my mentor, there's a whole little section, because he passed away in between the third edition, the fourth edition. He passed away about a year or two after, about a year and a half after we published Full Contact Leadership. And so, he's he's never very far from my writing, and there is a bunch of quotes in there. And, right in the beginning, the quote I use is the quote that you used in your book. And it was command confidence is based on command competence. No. Yes. Command confidence. I can't screw that up. Command confidence is based on command competence. I believe that's the quote.
No, absolutely. Because if you're not competent, you can't be confident in what you do. Dave, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we find that, and we've talked about it several times in the past, where you have guys that shoot up the ranks before they ever get a chance to really feel comfortable in each rank before they move up. Next, they're in the battalion vehicle and they're making, again, like I've said 1,000 times, split-second decisions based on really crappy information, and they don't have the bandwidth or the experience to be confident on the fireground. And to me, it's a recipe for disaster. So the quote is 100% on target.
And Anthony has one of the best books out there, especially if the chances are you probably read one of the editions during one of your promotional exams. It was probably one of the required reading books. But if you're a firefighter listening to this, don't wait until you become a command officer to start trying to learn all the complexities and nuances of command. This is the type of book you want to get when you're a firefighter so that you can use it throughout your career, because competency really, it's amazing how many people out there do command wrong. And all you got to do is look at our line of duty deaths, and you're going to see that it's part of command's failure that leads to a lot of breakdowns on the fireground. I'll start off with one, and I'll have Anthony and Dave weigh in. But one thing I see a lot of times is I'll see a chief arrive on scene, and this happens everywhere in the country. They take an incident command class, they arrive on scene, and they establish operations for the incident. And then you have the operations chief or whoever's filling that role. There's no rank in incident command. There's only function. So you have that individual running the fire, and then you'll have the incident commander start talking over operations to people who are in front of that operations officer. And it breaks down the entire function of command. Once you declare operations, you're the incident commander. Essentially, you're dealing with everything that's behind the operations. You could be dealing with logistics. You can be dealing with water supply issues, the press, the liaison. But the actual operations for that incident now all has to go through that operations officer. If you arrive on scene and you're the chief and you still want to be active in all of the decisions for operations, don't claim operations. Just establish divisions and stay in command of the fire. I could never understand that, and why has the fire service missed that point? I'll start with Dave.
Yeah, when I teach my class, my command under fire class, it's one of the first few slides that I have is, you're showing the flow of how a fireground is supposed to operate. Bread and butter fires, not large 4 or 5 alarm, fires, but something that is handled by 1 or 2 chief officers, and then you make your groups and divisions. And I tell them, once you establish operations, you have to ask yourself as the incident commander, what's your job? Because if you don't have liaison, finance, you don't have PIO issues or anything like that, you really don't have a job anymore, because operations is running the fireground. He's calling for additional apparatus. So you basically pulled yourself out of as being an incident commander. So that operations section chief is designed for large, complex incidents where you have more than just a fire going on. You may have a rescue sector. You may have extrication sector. You might have, where that incident commander is going to have to start focusing on larger things of getting the community back together, getting finances squared away. The next operational period, it may go beyond 12 hours, but for simple blood and butter fires, operations, it shouldn't be one of your first things you're going to pull out of your hat, because you basically pulled yourself out of the job.
Absolutely. And in New Haven, we weren't big on division. Well, we didn't even use incident command when I started there. And I actually brought in Anthony Avillo and a couple other key players to start training the department on how to use incident command. And now the department has gotten much better. There's still some work to do, but we are really on the path to success. So Anthony, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We only go to an operations chief in very specific incidents, situations. The first would be sort of like a complex incident, exotic incident, when you're dealing with, confined space, high angle rescue, which we do a lot of with the Cliffs, hazmat, things like that. I would designate an operations chief, or I would be operations. Or if we were at like a 4, 5, 6 alarm fire, the chief of the department would show up. He would become command, and I would become operations, and I would continue to maintain all of the operations. Other than that, we never really did that. I see that a lot in different departments where, I'm on the fire scene, I'm command, you show up now, I'm superior to you. So I'm going to make you operations, but you're standing right next to me. Command operations. Go ahead, command. We're right next to each other. It never made sense to me. What we do is I'm going to take that first chief, and whether I take command from him or I'm there before him, he's a division commander. He's going inside. The next chief is going inside into an exposure, whatever it happens to be. I don't think when you run the incident command system I think, and I've done 3, 4 alarm fires where the chief of the department never showed up, and I handled all of that. I was just command. So because I didn't have an operations chief, that meant I was operations and command. So I handled all that, fire watch, but I would also delegate that stuff out. Like once things start to we're starting to stabilize the incident, and we're starting to break down, I might assign a de-escalation officer, to start to help us start to put away the toys. I may assign somebody to something else, that sort of thing. But I was never really big on operations unless you really needed to have it there. And again, it's just not the way we operated, but that's not to say it's not wrong or it is wrong. No, it's not wrong at all. It's part of the incident command system. And just as you were saying, if you do it properly, where the incident commander steps back and, now he's dealing with press issues and fire watch and America and the Red Cross and, all those other things, relocations, those things, that has its place, where then the first incident commander could be a deputy chief. Now he's operations, so it just depends on the situation, and everybody's sort of got to be on the same page. And the biggest thing is you got to announce these things. If you don't announce who's in charge of what, then nobody knows who's in charge, and people are going to different places and different people. And now you have 6 people in charge, which, is worse than having no one in charge.
Absolutely. And I think that that's important, is that if whoever's in command, if they assign you, let's just use a division, for example, if they assign you a division, no matter where you work and your department uses incident command, and they don't announce your radio designation, what companies are responding to you, the book says what your tactical objectives are. You should know what your tactical objectives are in 99% of the calls. So I'm okay if you don't announce that over the radio, but you got to at least announce the radio designation and who's reporting to that division officer and where that division officer is going. Anthony, you want to weigh in on that?
Oh, okay. Communications is so important, and not only that, but you want to, these are things almost benchmarked, so you're actually laying out your command organization right over the radio, so you're marking these things. And one of the other things I always looked at was, for an incident commander, stay at the strategic level. You will find that sometimes the guy has to micromanage the scene. First engine, I pull right past here, get that hose line in, don't get it around the car. Now he's operating at the task level. He's not even at the tactical level. So that may be, necessary in some instances when you don't have a lot of staffing, or you have people that are newer or whatever it happens to be. But the incident commander has to get back to the strategic level as quickly as possible. And I've always been a very big believer in initial scene assignments. Initial scene assignments allow the incident commander to be the incident commander. He doesn't do the job of the company officers by throwing out, all of these sort of task-oriented orders. So I think as an incident commander, you have to stay up at that level, which then allows you to break the fireground. It allows you to run the fireground rather than the fireground running you.
Absolutely. So if you arrive on scene and you're assigned a division face to face and it's not announced over the radio, there's nothing that says that you as that division officer cannot get on the radio and say, Car 34 is now Division 2, Engine 6, Truck 4, and Engine 15 are reporting to me. And then when you get to that location, then don't just rely on your radio communication, because somebody will most definitely miss that communication. When you get to that location, try to muster up and herd all the cats for a second and say, hey, I'm here. Everything goes through me. Dave, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah. Like Anthony said, when you start breaking everything down, you start to reduce your span of control. That sweet spot is between 1 to 3 to 1 to 5. And once you start making your groups and divisions, and you're relying on either line officers to take those positions or chief officers take those positions, you can stay at the strategic level and you can say, okay, I need you guys to take, Division 2. And that's all you should say. They should know that if you're using Ricci OVS or whatever acronym that your department uses, then they know they're responsible for that. So when you ask for an LCAN, they're giving you that information. When we rewrote the policy in Frederick, we broke it down. Tactical command, which is the very first unit officer that arrives on the scenes, assumes that tactical command because they're operating in the tactical mode where we're pulling lines, they're supervising their crews. When the chief officer, the first command officer arrives, they assume the strategic command. They don't say that because it's automatically assumed, but they take a stationary command post and they assume that command, and they're working at the strategic level. So it's key to make sure that you stay in your lane so you're not micromanaging, because firemen will be the first one to point out when you start micromanaging them. And if you feel that you have to tell your people to pull a line, go search here, go here, do that, then it's either a failure on your part because you don't trust your people or you don't trust yourself.
Anthony always said it best about when other people come to your fire. You want to break up, this is an Anthony Avillo quote, you want to break up the opinion brigade so they can't be critiquing your fire. But it's very important if you're a chief officer to trust your people. If you don't trust your people, you have a training issue, and we see that a lot of times where people are micromanaged. If you have to take command, then put the person in the division where you know that person can succeed. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. If they're in the wrong division, then move them. But Anthony, you want to speak to that? Because not every fire you get the A team. Sometimes you got to move people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always, initially for us, our first due ladder, our first arriving ladder on a flat roof building would get the roof. And they would have the roof division. And that would be, a ladder officer. But I'm a big fan of eventually having, eyes on, hands off, rather than eyes on, hands on. A company office is eyes on, hands on. So if he's running a division, I think it puts him at a disadvantage. But there are times that he is going to run that early on until I get a chief up there. But I would always look for a roof division supervisor. If I was going to eventually put one up there, like we're going to have pretty extensive roof operation, I would always look for somebody who had truck experience. Look, okay, listen, stand by, or listen, you go take Delta, send Delta to the roof, because I know the Delta division supervisor right now is because I might have needed Delta first, and I trusted my ladder officer on the roof, but now I got this chief and I don't want him on the roof. That's the last place I want this guy, so I'll send him to Delta and I'll tell him, send the other guy to the roof. I may, just make sure, and I'll get on the radio. I'll make sure it's acknowledged and everything else, and it's on the radio. But yeah, you got to know your people. You got to know, who you can trust and who you have to sort of support a little bit. I'm not going to use the word not trust. I'm going to use the word support. The people you have to support a little bit more. And just as you said in the beginning, there are guys that go up through the ranks without having real experience and competence and confidence, and that comes over time. But I remember there were times when I was a battalion chief at the time, and we had a deputy we didn't have a deputy on the shift. So the deputy would rotate sometimes, would be an overtime deputy. And like, my guys would say to me, look, don't let him take command. Don't let him take command. Stay in command. And I'm like, I can't do that, So, it's something you got to know your people, you know who you can trust and you know who you can't, you know who you have to support more.
And along those lines, if you have that junior officer, say, who's just inexperienced, he's the new battalion chief, and you get there and there's enough division officers, there's nothing that says that you can't, if you're a senior to that person, that you can't declare over the radio that you're the senior advisor. And then you just stand next to him and just essentially whisper to him. But if you really want to diminish, remember, you're there to build that person. Once you pick up a radio or give an order to a crew walking by, now you just diminish that person's command, and everything that you set out to do, you just basically totally wasted it. So remember that if you are going to declare yourself a senior advisor to try to mentor and build somebody up on the scene, is that you really have to have command discipline, not to start commanding the fire and actually working with that chief. Something that I found throughout my career that I always did, because sometimes I came from the training academy, is instead of telling a chief what to do, when you're mentoring them, just ask them a simple question. And a lot of times they'll come to their own answer and be able to respond. Dave, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, 100%. When you kind of want to guide them in that direction, a true leader, a true senior chief officer can give you the idea and make you think that it was your idea all along, make it think that it's their idea all along, so they come to the conclusion that you want. Getting back to what Anthony says, knowing your people, I would tell new battalion chiefs, you got to get out of your office, you got to get in your vehicle, and you have to visit the stations. You have to have one-on-ones first with the company officer, and then bring everybody to the kitchen table and just take a pulse. How you all doing? And then you kind of get a read on who needs help, who needs, who doesn't. And that's how you start to learn your people. But if you're staying in your office all the time, or I've actually known chiefs that were so introverted that they were afraid to go into a firehouse, or when they did, they were automatically looking for an exit so they could get out. You're doing yourself a huge injustice to yourself and to your people. So yeah, you've got those inexperienced officers, and just because you outrank somebody doesn't mean you have to come on the scene and take command. It's always good to be in that senior advisory role. Like when I arrive on the scene, I've got 2 battalion chiefs working in the vehicle. I'll just sit in the back and listen to the radio and, hey, you guys need anything from me? I'll go out, take pictures, bring it back. But being that senior advisor and kind of allowing them to maneuver as an incident commander and kind of giving them little nudges here and there, it builds their confidence up. Instead of you just coming in and pulling the carpet out from underneath of them and they never get a chance to command a fire, eventually they're not going to have the confidence in themselves.
Now, Anthony, if you're a division officer and you have a company from the House of No show up at your fire, this is the company with no firefighters, no house fund, no TV in their firehouse. They don't train, no training. A lot of times I've seen and you hear about where competent incident commanders will just completely minimize them and ask them to essentially do nothing. And what I always say is give that company a tangible task that can be easily verified and hold them to it. For example, I need a ladder on every side of this building in my division, or whatever it may be. But every now and then you get a company that's not stellar. You got to give them a task so you can help build them. Just don't minimize them to the point where they're completely out of the game. Do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, you want to make them success oriented, right? You want to make them successful. So if you can do that, and that's something you have to talk about with the battalion chiefs even before that. Hey, listen, all right, we know these guys are like weak. That we know that they're not up to the same speed as everyone else. So let's make them successful. However, if they're lazy, we're going to make sure that they get some of the tasks that they know they're getting those tasks because they're not stepping up. But if it's a matter of just confidence and competence, I might use them with a company that I trust a lot, and now you have those 2 companies together, and now he's actually being mentored by another officer his rank that is, and they're maybe doing the same task. This is where you put a junior ladder officer on the roof with a senior ladder officer. So now you have those two guys working together. It's the same thing with pulling hose line. One of the things I think we do really well in North Hudson is our first two engines stretch the first line. So there's always a very good. Almost never do you have two sort of not confident and not that well schooled officers. You usually have one good one and one so-so one. So you might speak to the other officer and say, look, when you have this company in there, listen, if it's got to be taken care of, get in there and do the best you can to mentor this guy a little bit, but I think sometimes you got to drag these guys a little forward. Other times you have to support them a little forward. And other times when they're not getting it, you have to sort of beat them a little forward. if you catch my drift. Again, you have to know your people,
I think that's very well said. You set them up for success, marry them up with another company and help push that company forward. Yeah. Dave?
Yeah. Listen, we have 3 million companies, so we have to marry our companies together.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave.
That's okay. I like the fact that you like to give that company that needs a little bit of work. They're not polished like some of the other companies, but you give them a task that they will complete, and then they'll be successful for it, and kind of build them up a little bit. And then maybe even go as far as bring them to the command post, hot wash them, and tell them, hey, man, you did a really good job with that. Kind of builds their confidence up a little bit. But, like you said, if you got a company full of turds, then they're going to get some shit work, and they understand that you're getting this because you're not performing like you're supposed to be. And we've talked about this. But I don't think anybody comes to work and wants to be bad. But you always have the ability to give them tasks to let them shine a little bit.
Absolutely. And one other thing that a lot of company officers miss is they have to remember that information goes up, orders come down. And if the chief is only as good as their company officers, and if you're not relaying the information that chief needs to make that operation a success, you're hurting the entire department and the entire operation. For example, Anthony said in North Hudson, they normally always marry up the first 2 companies to get a line in place. But if you look at all of America, that isn't the case. That isn't their SOP. So if you're that first 2 company and you have a complicated stretch, and it doesn't even have to be a 3-person firefighting crew. New Haven, everybody has 4. I'd have no problem with a company officer on a complicated stretch on a 3-brace frame wood 3rd floor fire for the officer to get on the radio and say, I need another company to get my line in place. Now, if the chief isn't thinking about that, you gave them information. Now they have to, they don't have to, but the chances are that's going to kind of key their mind. And then they're going to assign that another company to get that line in place for you. The same thing is true with if you get an order for command to put up a 40-foot ladder or a 50-foot ladder. They may not be thinking about all that goes into that at the task level at that time. There's nothing that says the company officer can't get on the radio and say, Chief, I'm going to need another company to get this ladder in place. The chances are you're going to get it, because in a lot of fire departments, it's not short staffing. It's short on the people that are working. Anthony?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's listen, you're the guy with at the center of the issue once you've been given the order. It's like, what do you got? What are you doing about it? What do you need? If you don't tell me what you got, you don't tell me what you're doing, and most of all, if you don't tell me what you need, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get it. Listen, when we, our SOP says, first 2 engines stretch the first line. But if it's above the 3rd floor and above, the 3rd engine will help them too. So we'll use 3 engines. And then as soon as that line's ready, that 3rd company will peel back and maybe start assisting on a stretch for the 2nd line. I think that, it's you got to play the game based on the circumstances you're dealing with. Like John Norman said that, let actions dictate let circumstances dictate actions, right? The other thing was really important. Have you ever heard of the ladder of abstracts?
No.
Okay, the ladder of abstracts is based on the competence of the people that work for you and how well you know them. for instance, I got a brand new officer, right? Well, I got a division commander, okay, and a battalion. And I could say to him, especially because we've set expectations, work together, I could say, look, you got Delta. I don't have to say anything else to him. Or I got a solid ladder officer, like you got the roof. I don't have to say anything else to him. But if they're not high up on a ladder of abstracts, I might have to say to them, look, I need you to think about, you go back to firefighter 1. I need you to, grab the 35-foot ladder, use a low shoulder carry, put it 3 feet away from the building, pull 7 clicks. That's the lowest level almost on the ladder of abstracts, and you don't want to use that on a fireground. That's more training ground. But the ladder of abstracts and knowing where people are on that allow you to sort of, and you got to understand where they are, allows you to sort of shrink your order giving. You catch my drift on that?
I do. I actually think that's a great way to phrase it. And, for anybody out there that's a company officer listening to this, the highest praise a division chief or command could ever give you is when you arrive on a fireground and you walk up to the command post with your company ready to work and they say, go put out the fire. That's the highest praise. That's high on the ladder abstract. They know that you know what you're doing. Dave, weigh in on that. I know you cut out for a second. So on the ladder of abstract, of knowing your personnel and assigning them the right task.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost hand in hand with the chief of the department coming up and saying, "You're a hell of a fireman." That they recognize that you know what you're doing on the fireground. But yeah, when you roll up. When we changed in Montgomery County, we changed our box alarm over from 4 engines to 5 engines. And that 5th engine was always like the ace in the hole. And when you roll up and it's like, I need you up on the fire floor, put this friggin' fire out, please. That was always like, yep, we're here. And then, of course, you had a little bit of bragging rights afterwards. Hey, thank God we were here because, it would have lost the whole block, So, but yes, you can't get any more praise than that when they know you roll in and they view your company as, thank goodness you're here. Now we can get some work done.
Yeah, quick little story on that, Frank. We got this multiple alarm fire, and we have it pretty much knocked down. And the interior division on the second floor is asking for lights. So this company is coming to the command post, and it's a swap guy, an overtime guy, and maybe a detail guy. None of the guys were from the company, and they were all from other shifts. So I just told them, I go, look, we need lights up on the second floor. I said, you know what? The aerial's right here. Use the lights off the aerial, use the junction block and get it up there, right? So a few minutes go later, these guys are taking care of the business. The battalion calls me and says, I don't know, where are the lights? You got lights. I could see the wire snaking into the building. You got lights. He goes, I don't have lights. I go, yeah, they just completed that task. He goes, you want to come in here and take a look? Now the incident had de-escalated, so I walk in there and these guys, all they did, that little bubble on top of the junction block, off the reel? Yep. You have the reel and you plug the lights into it, but on it is that bubble telling you have power. That was the light they put. It was sitting on the kitchen table.
They wanted it to be romantic.
Right?
They wanted it to be romantic.
You don't think you got to tell these guys that, but this is where I learned now. Okay, don't ever take anything for granted when you don't really know your people because they were from a different shift, and one was an acting captain.
Trust but verify, right, Dave?
That's right. Trust but verify.
Exactly.
Have a little bit of faith into them. One other thing that seems to be a pet peeve with some officers is you get a fire. The battalion chief's running the fire. They have enough resources there. And then you have the chief of department who has to come to every single job and then try to take over. It doesn't try to build the officer and just takes over, or comes from home and they got a sloppy t-shirt on, they got jeans on, and a lot of the officers, they fail to realize that when you arrive on scene and you didn't shave. You say for officer, chief coming from home. You didn't take the second to shave or at least put on a job shirt or something to look professional. When you show up all disheveled, you're basically saying to your battalion chief, I don't trust you. There wasn't a second to spare before I got here. And chiefs are oblivious to it. It's always stop and make sure you're presentable, walk up like you own the place, and then ask, do you need anything? Or can I get you guys coffee and girls coffee or something when everything's this escalated. Just because you're chief of department don't mean you need to go to every fire. Dave, I'll let you weigh in on that first.
And even if you do, if it's a small department or whatever, and the chief goes, you're going there to say like, hey, it really sounds like you got this really under control. I want to take make it positive. Just because I'm here doesn't mean I'm going to take over. But on the opposite spectrum, if that chief goes there and says, well, I'm here, I have to take over, you've demeaned you've just basically told your command staff, I don't trust you to do a good job, or I'm better than you, or like you said, I think the story you had told once before was the dude showed up in a flannel shirt and you said, what, are you here to chop some wood or something? Yeah, you have to look your best. Even when I'm running as the duty chief in Frederick and I show up, if it goes to a multiple alarm, I've got my uniform hanging up. I'll put my uniform on, try to brush my hair or put on my baseball hat or whatever. And then I go to the scene and I said, hey, you guys need anything? I'm going to take some pictures. Sounds like you got it under control. But you just don't have to show it. And even if you want to, great, be there to support and not as to, take it away from them.
There's a story in the book that I just wrote, but that both of you contributed to, which I really appreciate. That way people read it. But I left this part out of the story, but it's relevant to this conversation. So New Haven got called to Yale New Haven Hospital to the operating room. The rescue got called because a lady's arm was caught in a meat grinder. And the officer did an unbelievable job because the surgeons, some of the world's best surgeons, they wanted to amputate the arm. And he was able to use his command presence to convince them that if they let the rescue work with a limited team, they'd be able to get the arm out. Well, while he convinces these surgeons, the chief of operations shows up from home, like scruff on their face and wearing like civilian clothes. I don't think they even had a fire department shirt or anything on. When they got to the hospital and the chief of operations walked in, the lady from the hospital thought he was a family member, and they brought him into the other room. And he's like, why am I here? And they started counseling him to give him a hug that, it was going to be okay. And they were doing everything possible because they had no idea that he was a fire chief. So I always thought that was funny. So always look professional, at least have a coat in your car or something that you can look good. Anthony, weigh in on that.
I would, I think that, you talk about, I would sometimes show up and I might say over the radio, Deputy 1 is going to remain in service on the scene. Battalion 1 will retain command, something like that. Or I may, as the incident escalates, I'll say Deputy 1 is going in service, remaining on scene. Battalion 1 will now have command, and I'll just, be there sort of helping out or whatever, or handling things behind the scene, something along those lines, and then kind of giving him the information. Generally with us, if you show up on the scene, you're in gear, so nobody even knows what the hell you have underneath your gear, to be honest with you. But our chief, usually from the chiefs of department, they usually showed up looking pretty solid as far as those things went. I think our directors probably caused that to happen. Probably one of the best things for them was I never became the chief of the department because, you never know what I'm going to show up in,
No, I think I think it's all how you present yourself when you get there. If they don't feel that you're just there to check up on them, something that I would do is if I just popped in at a fire that was, everything was under control. I had the union credit card because I was union president too. So I would always pull up if it was nothing because I just wanted to go to fire. And I would say, hey, I came to get you guys coffee and girls coffee, but if there's anything you need first, I'll do it. And then that always lowered the temperature, oh, he knows we got this. Mm-hmm. And then I go get him coffee if there was nothing to do. So you got to have confidence in your people and build them up. One thing that Anthony does a phenomenal job, and North Hudson does a phenomenal job, and you taught me the term because I never even heard of it until I read one of your books, was tactical reserve. You're big on having personnel that you can put into the game. And one of the things that I always put in my FDIC class is I always say, how many people in this class have a RIT team of 3 people? And still to this day, so many hands go up. And I use an example and I say, okay, so if you were put in charge of a funeral and you had to go to the wife or husband after their member was lost, and they said they only wanted 3 pallbearers, what would you do? And people are quick, oh, no, I would explain that we need 6 to bury them with dignity. I'm like, okay, so in sunshine and fresh air to transfer stairs and to give somebody a funeral with dignity, you need 6, but you only need 3 at a fire. So why aren't you at least calling another company to the scene? You have a radio. There's nobody on scene that says you can't call for more help. And I think that North Hudson really figured that out with the tactical reserve. Can you explain that, Anthony? And then we'll go to Dave.
Well, I always tried to have, my rule of thumb was, if I don't have 3 companies in reserve while the incident is still escalating, I'm striking another long. And I'm not going to get that right away. You know, I'm looking for that. I'm looking to have people have nothing to do, which means we're probably stabilizing this incident. And at some point when I have a lot of these people, we're going to probably start to release them. But one of the things I put in the new book, and I did an article about it, it was called The Rat. And the Rat is the RIT Assist team. And the RIT Assist team comes from, and we don't use it in North Hudson because I did it after I retired. I don't know if anybody uses it, but it makes so much sense to me. So because we have 3-man RIT team, right? So let's say my RIT team's in place. I got a couple of companies in my tactical reserve. So I turn around and I tell Engine 4, all right, you guys are the Rat. Now, Engine 4 is still available to go into, stretch an additional line or whatever. But while they're the Rat, if the RIT team gets activated, they automatically double the number of the RIT team. All right. They automatically do that. So let's say you're my division commander and say, look, I need another line on the 2nd floor. All right, look, I'm sending Engine 4 up. Now I'll turn around and I'll sell Engine 3. You guys are the Rat. So they're a dedicated resource only if the RIT goes to work. Now, the nice thing about that is not everybody can be a RIT team, but everybody can be a Rat, because all they're basically doing is probably, helping carry equipment in. And they would have some very basic ideas of like, carries and drags, how to use a drag rescue device, how to set up a Nance maneuver, that sort of thing. They're just there to, and this now, it would cause the incident commander to strike another alarm when he doesn't have these additional companies in tactical reserve, not only because I may need companies to do stuff because, shit happens on a fireground, but God forbid a 3-man RIT has to go to work. Now, it's sort of a mechanism to reduce the frenzy, because now I got 6 guys automatically. And because what happens when you have a real RIT operation? What happens to your command structure? What happens to the operational structure? Everybody, I'm not an expert on RIT or anything like that, but it just makes sense to me to have something in place before that even happens. The RIT team they're doing all their ladders and raising them all over the building, et cetera. But once they're settled and operate and sort of standing by as the RIT, well, why can't I have another company sort of ready to back them up if they go in? And here's another thing that I put in the new book. Why can't the RIT team, once they are finished setting up your fireground and secondary egress and all the things they do, why can't they become part of your accountability team? Why can't they? Because how many departments actually have an accountability officer running a command board? Why can't the RIT run the command board? Right? So, because what's the most important thing for the RIT? Know where everybody is.
Everybody is. So
the RIT runs the command board. The RAT supports the RIT, and it all comes from tactical reserve. So it's a little, I don't know, it might be a little bit far-fetched, but to me, it just makes so much sense.
No, it makes perfect sense, because everybody wants to go to the fire. I mean, too many chiefs out there look at additional companies like change in their pocket, and they're at the store and they're like, oh, I need another $1. Dave, weigh in on calling for help.
Yeah, I think either you said it or somebody said it a long time ago that everybody wants to come to your fire. When we have a rapid intervention company, which is automatically dispatched on a full assignment or a box alarm. And that unit is responsible for the initial rapid intervention. They'll take over for the 2 out. It's a 3. We're moving into 4-person staffing now in Frederick. So it could be a 4-person crew. The moment they know they have a working incident, a rapid intervention dispatch is automatically sent, which will give you another 3 companies. So you're starting to build out where you're going from 3 to 9. And then based on the size of the building, that's where your second chief comes into play, or even that senior advisor saying, hey, they're operating on the Charlie side. You may need to have a second rapid intervention company working on the Charlie side as well as one on the Alpha side, because those crews are operating on the second floor. Or maybe it's a big box store. 6 guys can't get into a big box store to find somebody. You might need 15, 20 people to really have a robust rapid intervention company. So as a command officer, if you know your resources are limited, call for them early. If you're in an urban environment where there's a lot of people right away, call for them early. You can always send them home and you don't need them, but nobody minds coming to your fire, especially if they get a chance to work.
Absolutely. Another thing, when we were talking about keying and having the incident commander or the command kind of figure something out, we were talking about later arriving companies. One thing that I've witnessed, which defies logic, is you'll have a later arriving company come in. Command is so focused on what's going on, even though things are de-escalating. And when that extra company comes, instead of saying, all right, I need your company to tarp everything on the floor below, it almost gets missed. And it's something, Anthony Avillo, you have a great term for it, is that, after the fire, you need to wrap the occupants in cotton. You've been a big influence on my career, but that starts at the actual fire. So, if you're third or fourth, when I was an engine officer and I was fourth due and I knew that there was a 1-room fire and there was nothing there, when I went to the command post, I tell my crew to grab a line, because New Haven, everybody brings their own line. And I tell the hydrant person to bring 2 tarps. They'd have them right under their arm. Now, if something happened, I missed something and we went to work, you can drop the tarps at the front door. Somebody will pick them up. It'll key somebody's mind. But nobody's really thinking about, everybody wants to get to work. Well, if the fire's out, there's nothing left to do. Why don't you want to make a positive impact? Why don't you kind of key command thing and say, hey, we got tarps. It looks like they got it. Do you want us to tarp the floor below? And I think most command officers out there would be like, absolutely. David first.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We just had a fire in my local volunteer company. The house was pretty much lost. We were able to maintain a portion of the house, and we were actually able to go in and do a lot of salvage. We saved a lot of pictures. They had a lot of antique firearms and things like that. That meant more to those people, even though they lost their entire house. But to have those photographs, and for the younger people out there, that's a picture that's on your phone, but it's actually a piece of paper. To give them those photographs that they'll never be able to have again meant more to them. Family Bible, things like that. So salvage is important. Nobody wants to do it, but again, when you have these reserves, go start tarping the basement. You may have people that are running a business out of their basement, and that computer is their life. If you can at least get a tarp over that, save their computer, you may save their home business. So
nobody's ever called City Hall to say, hey, the fire department did a great job cutting a hole in my roof or stretching down the hall. It's always about their belongings, right, Anthony?
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunately the fire department, we have more of a, break things mentality than save things mentality. And I don't mean saving a building. I mean, just what you're talking about, the salvage end of it, and that again has to be, if it's important to the incident commander, it's important to everybody else. And it's got to be that way, but that's what, if you look at the people, it's sort of like the opposite where, you say the first impression is always the best, first impression is always the one that lasts. It's not really when you have a fire. It's oftentimes the last impression. What did we leave them with? We left them with a load of rubble, all kinds of damage, broken windows, all kinds of stuff. We didn't explain why we did anything. No, they have no idea why we did anything that we did. And we just, see you later. Well, we left them with the police department who, they don't know either. I think you have to maintain that sort of whole, cycle of operations, from taking care of them from the beginning when, we're doing primary search and everything else, to taking care of them at the end, to, it's just little things, letting them know where to get a fire report. And, as Dave said, just, saving some of their valuables. You don't know what's valuable to people, Now, while that's having been said, the other thing we have to understand as an incident commander is when we can't save something, when when we are not, when we have to be careful about risking our people for something that's going in a dumpster tomorrow. And that's a very big piece of the puzzle. We hurt and injure a lot of firefighters in what I like to call the structural carcass. And it's happened. We had a guy, and I don't know exactly where it was, but a guy they were overhauling, and it was a truss structure, and friggin' floor collapsed and killed a guy. Once the life hazard has been secured, and we're dealing in buildings that change the rules, like truss construction, structural carcasses, no firefighter should ever die in those buildings. But it happens, and a lot of times, I know I'm getting off subject a little bit, but a lot of times it happens because, one, we don't like to lose. Two, sometimes we stay in a little longer than we should because of our mentality of saving stuff. So we got to be careful sometimes with how far we go, depending on the building. You got to know your building construction. You got to know, what the fire did to the building. And, this may be sort of opening another whole little hallway of discussion here. But it's something I believe in.
And I think it goes back to benchmarks, your time benchmarks. Are you losing track of time? Are you getting emotionally involved in your fire that you're not taking into account time? So this is actually a good time to talk about some of those command benchmarks. One of my personal pet peeves is we know generally the two first benchmarks is the first line in place. A lot of times, you could see it, but the most important benchmark to me is, what's the condition of the primary search, and is it announced by geographic location? Don't just say primary search is complete. Make it by geographic location. You wouldn't buy property in Florida without going to see it. So, primary search is second floor complete. That way you ensure that the entire structure is complete. Weigh in on those benchmarks, primary search, secondary search. Here's a good question to start off. When do you think that the secondary search should be declared? Because in some fire departments, you'll hear over the radio, primary search, second floor complete, and 3 minutes later, you'll hear, even if it's another company, which ideally is who we want to do the secondary, secondary search complete while the fire is still actively raging. Is that too early? Well, what's both of your experience? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer with this, but what's your preference on when that secondary search benchmark is called? I'll start with David.
The primary, obviously, you want right away. We're big on ensuring the occupant status, especially when the first arriving unit arrives on the scene. They're giving their on-scene report. They're doing their 360, and we need to know what the occupant status is. It could be unknown, it could be accounted for, or trapped. Most of the time, it's unknown. I'll assign an ambulance crew when they arrive on the scene. Go find the homeowners. I don't care if you got to knock on 10 doors. Go find the homeowners. All the while, we're working on our primary search. Once that primary search is complete, we should be concentrating on making sure that the fire's being compartmentalized and then extinguished. Once it's extinguished, then I'm going to go ahead and assign another crew to the second search, but it's not going to be right after the first search. You're going to have to get conditions lifted a little bit so you can do that in-depth, see what's going on. If you do a primary search of the second floor and then you throw another company in there to do a secondary search and they're still putting the fire out, you're going to miss the same stuff that they missed. So it's going to be once the fire's knocked and you've got conditions lifted a little bit.
Chief Avillo?
Yeah, I completely agree with Dave. You don't run a secondary immediately after a primary, or even at the same time. They're just following them up. It's when conditions are better. When the building the building's been checked for stability, we've done a bit of a safety survey. We've lit up the area a little bit. Some of these. Listen, secondary search is it's done when it's done once the situation is de-escalating. It's done once the fire is knocked down. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I don't think there's any rush for a secondary search. I really don't. Primary search, absolutely, but not a secondary search. Secondary search should be a later on, but not missed type of operation. You were talking about the benchmarks, though. One of the things I think we need to do in a benchmark now is, and it should be the benchmark, water on the fire, right? Water on the fire. Your company officers should be in tune with that and conditioned with that, that they say, okay, water is on the fire. Boom, that's a benchmark, right? Because now other things can occur on your fireground that maybe couldn't occur until water was on the fire. So same as a primary, I'm thinking that, and I put this in the book too. I think water on the fire has to be a benchmark now in the sort of in the world we live in, because there are people who are waiting to hear that to do other things.
And not only that, the other thing as the incident commander standing outside is if they say they have water on the fire and from the outside, it doesn't look like water's on the fire, it could mean you have a whole other problem. So I always say, even for individuals taking promotional exams, one of those key things is you always got to evaluate what's being said on the radio versus what you're seeing. Because while we know there's always a little disconnect, if there's a big disconnect, you generally have a big problem. Dave?
Yeah, the water on the fire, that is a benchmark for us in Frederick. Let us know we got a line on the fire. And is it matching what the incident commander is seeing? More importantly, like you said, Frank, there's other companies that are waiting to do other things. We preach ventilation discipline. It's a systematic thing where the engine and the truck company are communicating. I got water on the fire. Okay, I can start taking the windows of the fire room to start alleviating those conditions. And hey, we got the fire knocked. Okay, now we've checked for extension. Maybe we can start a fan and start getting some good ventilation going. But it allows those companies that are on the outside, your outside vent man or whatever, hey, I actively hear water flowing. I see water on the fire. They're saying water's on the fire. I'm going to go ahead and ventilate. So it's a discipline thing, but it's definitely something that needs to be broadcasted. Plus, it also allows for that time, your elapsed time of how long has this fire been burning? And if it is knocked, what's the structural stability now?
Anthony, do you in North Hudson, do you have a recommended time that dispatch should say to the incident commander that a certain amount of time has lapsed?
Yeah, they do. I believe they do. I think it's 15, 30, 45 an hour. And then after that, I think it's every half hour. You're an hour and a half to get a fire. I think, don't quote me on that, but I know there are benchmarks. They will let you know, command, be advised, you're 15 minutes into this fire. Be advised, you're 30 minutes. It might be every 15 minutes. Now I'm thinking of it. And usually what happens after that is I start thinking, okay, I got to get a command report together in the next couple of minutes, so that will cue me in to get some division reports at that point, But yeah, they do that. I think was a real sort of aid in sort of just keeping you in the time frame game.
Dave, what's Frederick do for?
It's from time of dispatch. So the first IDR is going to be at 20 minutes from the time of dispatch, and then it's no more than 20 minutes after that. We do have some long responses, but that's letting you know that since time of dispatch, 20 minutes has elapsed. And that's how long this fire has been burning. Do you have water on the fire yet? And like Anthony said, you can start getting those reports, those LCANs from your divisions and your group supervisors, so you can put your command report together, so you can give communications, your update, because the chiefs are listening if they're at headquarters or whatever. They're trying to hear what's going on. Do I need to come? Is it escalating? Is it de-escalating? But that benchmark, that IDR, that incident duration reminder, is letting you know elapsed time is happening and you should be doing things. Especially after 20 minutes, you might need to conduct your first par check of the units that are in the IDLH. So it is part of the benchmarks, and I think most of the Washington metropolitan areas, they're using IDRs, whether it be 15 minutes since time of dispatch or 20 minutes since time of dispatch, and then it's no more than 20 minutes after that. And the incident commander is the only one that can shut those IDRs down.
Oh, okay. I think that's pretty good. We're at the witching hour, so we'll kind of go around the horn here. One thing that Anthony was talking about earlier was about the incident commander being on that strategic level and the company officer being on the tactical level, and then the firefighters on the task level. I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. I had a Joe Biden moment here on politics and tactics. Oh, I got it back. Look at that. So I was going to be like Mitch McConnell, so I'll be bipartisan. Remember that the best part, if you're one of those chiefs who like to work with your hands, if you're working with your hands, you're not working with your mind. But if you like to work with your hands, the opportunity to do that is on the training ground. When the companies are training, that's where you can go and show some leadership and go first and be involved in a task that you normally wouldn't be involved in, and then step back. You'll earn some respect. But just because you're a chief doesn't mean you should sit in your office. You got to get out of your office on the training ground and train. For example, if your department's doing live burns, and I know a lot of departments that do live burns, but don't have the command officers come to command the live burns. Now, I'm not saying you have to have the command officer command the live burn all day long. When I became the drill master, New Haven used to do live burns with the companies, and they wouldn't have any chief officer come down. And it's like, that makes absolutely no sense. I don't need the chief officer to be there all day long, but I need him at least be there for one evolution to run one fire, and then they can leave. And I'll rotate the 3 chiefs that are on duty in there for that day. And that way I at least know they're getting their hands on it. They can see what their personnel are doing. They can see where there's deficiencies. And you know what's funny? By doing it that way, where it didn't look like it was so burdensome that they only had to come down for one when they didn't come down at all before that, they would all stay. They wouldn't leave. They would stay. They'd participate in the other. They'd watch the crew. They'd talk to their personnel. But it was like, oh, the training division isn't like, harassing me. They because it was fun, they would stay. Let's go around the horn about training and anything else that you want to say to wrap this up. And thank you to Anthony Avillo, who's been a mentor. I hold you in the highest esteem, Anthony. You have taught me in the fire service so
ditto, brother.
On the political end, the only thing that I've been really happy with is that John Alston finally did away with your alphabet privilege, and you're not listed first on fire engineering's letterhead anymore. But your impact on the fire service is unbelievable, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come on Politics and Tactics tonight, which you were a founding member of this before you broke off with Duffy. So Dave and I
was on the inaugural show.
You were. I was the Republican. I think Duffy was the Democrat. And we used you as the disenchanted.
I was the disenchanted. I'm still the disenchanted. So 2 things real quick. Number one, you talk about McConnell. Do you ever see the picture they show side by side, him and Jagger? Jag is 80, he's 81. It says, look what a life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll can do for you.
Oh, I love it. That's so good.
McConnell looks like he's got 1 foot in the grave. He looks like a skeleton. Well, Jagger looks like a skeleton, but he's got hair, right, and he rocks out.
And he still sings.
And he can still sing. The other thing, you talk about training. I used to be the victim in the RIT training, and eventually we would build the RIT training up, and eventually it would be in this warehouse, and everybody would be hooded, and they'd have to come and find me with a pass device on and the pack trackers, and they'd have to get me in a sked and get me out, and they would beat the living shit out of me. I mean, I would come out of there like, no, because listen, what are they doing? They're dragging you, they're converting your harness and all that, and they're not being easy. It's just like when the master streams always aim for the command post. You give them that opportunity, they see that you're in there and you're playing the game with them, and that's why, and this is a whole nother show. That's why I think the incident commander needs to be out in front of the building.
I agree. I love it.
Vince Lombardi never coached a game from the locker room.
David, a shot across the bow.
It's okay. I'm in front of the building. I'm just in a climate-controlled environment where I don't have to listen to people yelling and screaming all the time. But
I don't understand what they're saying because none of them are speaking English.
Right. Just so you know, Frederick's last fire, the firefighters were all hot, dehydrated. Dave's like, let him eat cake. I'm nice and comfortable in here.
I don't take command like it was in my previous life, but you're 100% correct, Frank. Being a chief officer, being part of senior staff, we're beta testing the second part of the from the Ball Road report from Josh Laird's line of duty death. We're doing safety and survival, preventing the Mayday and things like that. So all of senior staff, from the fire chief all the way down to us assistant chiefs and all the deputies, we went out on the training grounds and we went through the 4 stations that they had put together. And it beat our ass, but it was really good training. And I look at it as if I can get out of the office and put my gear on and do stuff, I'm happy, because the work is always going to be in the office. When I go back, it'll still be there. But to be able to continue to put my gear on and to participate, pull a hand line, maybe command a few things, but then after that, we'll rotate the chiefs through. And and I'm going to go in with a crew. It still keeps my skills fresh. It keeps me fresh. And it also shows the younger guys that, hey, he's one of us, still one of us, even though he's wearing a white shirt, he's still a fireman and he still wants to go in and do the job. And I think that builds your credibility up, but it also makes you human. And it shows that, you're willing to go first, make the mistakes, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So 100% get those senior staff guys out there, get them involved in the training, build up your credibility.
Very well said. It's an honor to have both of you on tonight. That's it for Politics and Tactics. Remember that when you are a chief and you're commanding the fire, every fire, something goes right. And then you go to City Hall and you talk about budgets and who did this wrong and who did that wrong. When you got to bring problems to City Hall, remember, always say something positive about your department. Let them know what a great job your department did. What this one company did on this medical or this fire. Don't get into a habit of speaking to the political class in America and always saying what the budget problem is, what the disciplinary problem is. It's a trap, and it only diminishes your department and your own command. Remember, you're not a politician. You're an advocate for the men and women that serve the community. And anytime you talk to a politician, there are times where you have to talk about discipline. You have to talk about budget problems, but always either start or end the conversation with something positive the men and women under your command did. Leave them with a good impression. That's it for Politics and Tactics tonight. Again, honor to have Anthony Avillo, one of the original members, the original gangster, on, I think his family owns a trash company too, but the original gangster on Politics and Tactics, and Dave, and we miss Sam Bellani, who's away tonight. Mark, take us off. And on behalf of Fire Engineering, thank you, everybody. Hope to see you at FDIC. Check out Anthony's new book.